Hello, beautiful people, and welcome. Hi, to the Mualani post-release analysis. Mualani has been out for about 2 weeks now. Like I mentioned in the first impressions video, I haven't been able to test her for 2 weeks because it took a while to actually get a functional build going. But at least for the past week and a half, I've been doing a bit of testing, listening to other people's opinions on her, and thinking about her place. And so, as usual, for the post-release, we'll go through the pre-release video. We'll pick out what we were right about, what we were wrong about, and things we missed. So yeah, let's get right into it. Her whole kit is built around very slow attacks that deal a lot of damage. She doesn't have ICD on her Sharky's Bite, which means she can react on every hit, and she doesn't really do anything other than that damage. So because of that, she is very clearly a character that is designed around forward vaping. She's still playable in other teams. You can still use her in a mono hydro team or something like that, but you're obviously not taking advantage of her kit nearly as much. As we're gonna. So after testing a bunch of the non-pyro teams, I definitely stand by that. The non-vape teams feel like you're playing a shitty unit. It feels like Mualani's garbage if you're playing her in non-vape teams. The teams can still perform relatively well, just like you can have a fucking Xinyan team that performs relatively well if the rest of the team is pulling their weight enough, but it definitely doesn't make her feel like a good unit. And so I would highly recommend sticking pretty much exclusively to vape teams. That being said, if you don't want to play her in vape teams, you don't have to. The mono hydro teams will still be strong enough to clear. It's just, not ideal. Her team options are kind of lacking right now, but when it comes to forward vape teams, the reason why we haven't had many that are popular isn't just the lack of forward vape hydro units, it's also the fact that there aren't really non-hydro units that you'd want to put in those teams that would be very good. And that's definitely something that we're going to see with her, is the lack of currently available units that synergize well with her. The idea that we still don't have ideal teammates for her definitely holds true. It's not that there aren't teammates that function. It's just if you look at her strong teams, you'll notice a lot of the characters that you use in those teams end up having some form of anti-synergy with the team in one way or another, which is unfortunate. Weapons I'll cover really quickly because there's basically nothing to say. I have no revisions to this whatsoever. Next, artifact sets. I think for most people, it ended up being just 2-piece until they would farm a decent Obsidian Codex. Took me a little bit, but I do have a pretty decent Obsidian Codex now, so it is what it is. Okay. The way that her kit is designed gives her a relatively long uptime with damage that comes out at the end of your animations rather than at the start, which makes it so that buff duration can become a pretty big problem. The fact that your stack generation happens before your damage, right? Yeah, so that's something that tends to be an issue. I'm sure I talked about it in a little bit more detail. It's something that tends to be an issue in the VV teams, most of all. And in those VV teams, most of the time what you're going to get is you're going to get 2 actually buffed chomps, and then 1 unbuffed chomp. Oops. I got fucking staggered. That's very annoying. But yeah, you can get 2 buff chomps before your buffs expire, but they'll pretty much always expire by the 3rd one. It's unfortunate. It means that only 2/3 of your base motion value, at best 2/3 of your base motion value, actually benefits from VV. But if you use your burst, which generally better to use it than to not use it, then it's actually less than 2/3 of your motion value because you're either going to sacrifice one of your 2 chomps during uptime for your burst, or you're going to burst outside of your uptime. And then that means that less than half of your damage happens, or less than half of your base motion value happens when you're fully buffed. That doesn't actually translate to less than half of your damage, because obviously if you start with 40% of your motion value, when you buff it to twice what it was, then it'll be more than the remaining 60% of your motion value in terms of damage. I'm emphasizing on this point to focus on how much value you're missing out on from the fact that your buff duration is pretty short. And the main reason why I'm talking about it so much is because of Xilonen leaks. Xilonen has been leaked to be a character that is a Geo character that obviously can use the Natlan support set because she's a Natlan character, and whose kit is Resistance Shred. So she can effectively be used as a pseudo VV unit, except the duration of that Resistance Shred is a bit longer than VV is, right? So VV base duration is 10 seconds, and Xilonen's debuff duration, I don't want to get too in-depth on her, especially because we're still relatively early in the beta, so everything is still very heavily subject to change. But her debuff duration is about 15 seconds. And those 5 additional seconds are enough to get your third chomp and your ult out. And so as such, the idea that a lot of the good units, or a lot of the units that work well in Mualani teams, have some form of anti-synergy is really shown with this, where the low uptime on VV, lacking synergy with Mualani's slightly longer DPS uptime. It's a downside that future units could not have, and so her team versatility could increase in the future. I know in the pre-release I mostly talked about units separately. I think now in the post-release, now that I've actually tested the teams enough, I want to talk about archetypes within Vape. So it's mainly gonna be Burn Vape, VV Vape, and I guess Farina Vape. I guess Burn Vape can just be included in Brain Dead Vape. So the main reason why I'm separating them in these different categories is because from what I've gathered playing her, there really are just three main ways of building your team with her. So VV Vape is just the typical get a VV, buff her as much as possible, and vape. Farina Vape is play her with Farina, except the fact that if you up, even if you don't up, if things happen that delay your timing in small ways, or that accelerate your timing in small ways, you can end up missing vapes. It's annoying, it happens, but it's not completely crippling, because if you miss a vape on Mualani, it means you got a vape on Farina. It's still fine. But you build your team around the knowledge that Farina is there and she's also dealing damage and vaping. The Farina Vape team is pretty much only doable with Xiangling Baiju. Baiju can be replaced for Yao Yao, but it definitely, like, having tested both, it kind of feels like ass with Yao Yao, so it's pretty much only a Baiju thing. The main reason for that is that even with Xiangling's Pyro app, if you don't have a way to weaken your Hydro application, the Hydro app from Farina is going to end up overtaking Xiangling if you're also attacking with Mualani. And once it overtakes Xiangling, it's not really going to leave, and you're not going to actually have a Pyro Aura, so you're not going to vape anymore, which is different from missing one vape because of bad timing. With Baiju, the Dendro app completely wipes Hydro, and it makes it a lot easier to get your Pyro back on the enemy. And then Brain Dead Vape is just, you use Mualani, a Pyro unit, and then additional characters that will not interfere with your Pyro. And those additional characters that will not interfere with your Pyro are characters that either just don't apply element, or characters that either don't weaken the Pyro enough to completely remove it, or don't weaken the Pyro at all. So effectively, Dendro or Geo units. And so the teams you're going to end up building are generally going to look either like this for the Farina one, like this for the VV Vape ones, or like this, or this, or this, or this, or you can do the exact same thing with Nahida, or you can do this, or this. And obviously the Pyro itself can also be changed with other Pyro characters. You have a lot of flexibility. It's the most flexible of the 3 Vape sub-archetypes. In my experience, the teams that have performed the best are the double Dendro variation of the Brain Dead Vape teams. I've been using Dea as my Pyro option, but honestly, you can kind of just use whoever. This is a team that does not have a healer, and it doesn't really have a healer alternative, unless you want to, like, just play a healer that doesn't help you at all outside of healing, like Baiju or something. You can use shielders instead of Dea, but I've found that using Prototype Amber on Nahida is kind of more than enough. And the other team that I've found the best performance with has been the Farina team. I think that both Brain Dead and VV teams are gonna get a nice little boost with Xilonen if she gets released in her current state, which again, incredibly large grain of salt. But we'll have to see how that goes. I'm realizing I'm kind of rushing through this because I feel like I don't have that much to say about Mualani. Yeah, because she's a very straightforward character. In terms of strength, I think that overall, she is a relatively strong character. She's a sort of character that's pretty good for speedruns, and that's relatively consistent because she can easily get almost 100 crit rate or over 100 crit rate because of her artifact set and her crit ascension. In terms of like more casual gameplay, I still think she's strong, but I definitely don't think she's outstanding. She has the potential to get better in the future, but not really so much that I would expect her to overtake Neuvillette or anything close to that. But like I mentioned in the pre-release, and I think the first impressions as well, I don't think it's necessarily fair to compare her to Neuvillette. Obviously, I mean, they're both carries, and so comparing a carry to another carry is always like somewhat reasonable, but a lot of people draw the comparison with her more so than with other carries because they're both HP scaling hydro catalysts, and like I mentioned already, because they're not really played using the same supports, I just don't think that comparison holds much water. You can make it, but I don't think they're all that similar. Last thing I want to quickly address, I guess, is Kazuha versus Sucrose in her VV Vape teams. I've been enjoying Sucrose more. I think they're both usable. But I mean, this tends to be the case very often for vape teams. With very few exceptions, most vape teams slightly prefer Sucrose, but can still make do completely fine with Kazuha. Sucrose's shorter animations are really nice from Mualani because it makes it easier to get both of your chomps out before you lose your uptime. Against mobile enemies like the PMA, where it's a bit harder to get all of your stacks as quickly as optimally possible. Not having the about 1 more second of uptime that you get from Sucrose, if you don't have to go through Kazuha's animations, can be the difference between getting your vape or not, or sorry, getting your VV on your vape or not, but it won't necessarily be. And so it's really not that big of a deal. But yeah, I think that's gonna be it. Again, I apologize for the shorter post-release than most others, but I really do think she's straightforward enough that it warrants for a shorter post-release. So that's gonna be it for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, YouTube.